20 years ago, the European Union opened its doors to 10 new nations in the largest single expansion in its history. From the Baltics to the Mediterranean, 74 million people each brought with them their own traditions, struggles and dreams. Yet these new EU citizens have always been European in spirit. Life after accession continued, mostly as it always did. Joining the EU didn't redefine who they were, it simply added new layers to their ordinary lives.
Around us, it's just modern, fast life. Everybody just go to somewhere and just in fast version. Maybe we can stop for a second, just look at the details, look at the nature, have a smile on our face, just because life is really beautiful.
What do young people in the EU dream of? Much like youth everywhere, they dream of family and exciting jobs, amazing holidays and laughter. Sophia dreams of her friends and family living through this day and surviving the entire war. Sophia is Ukrainian. She studies journalism and aspires to make a film one day about life during wartime, capturing the struggle to hold on to normalcy amid extraordinary circumstances.
About how people live their ordinary life, how they used to live this ordinary life every day.
What has changed in our lives since joining the EU? What have we gained or lost? What have we learned? We have visited these 10 countries and spoken to people who represent the spirit and culture of their homelands. We listened to stories of money and politics, youth and aging, art and human rights, emotions and ecology. We spoke of a museum yet to be built and the walls of isolation yet to be broken down. We talked about life as it truly is. Ordinary, but also extraordinary. Slovenia, a small country nestled between the Alps and the Adriatic, has faced profound transformation over the past 35 years. From the dissolution of Yugoslavia through independence to joining the European Union, Slovenia's journey has been a story of choices, individual and collective. Therefore, to share her reflections upon choices made and those still to come, we invited the author of the book, The Tyranny of Choice, Renata Salecl, a Slovenian philosopher, sociologist and legal theorist.
I have been studying in the past how the transition happened from socialism to post-socialism. I use interdisciplinary approach, I use psychoanalysis, philosophy, sociology to try to understand, the complex social situation that we are living in.
In 1991, Slovenia made a bold choice to break away from the disintegrating Yugoslavia and assert its independence. This choice was not without sacrifice, as the country experienced a brief but intense conflict. Yet the decision to stand apart, to be independent, shaped the Slovenia that we are now in.
Slovenia, when it succeeded from Yugoslavia, went through a short 10-day long war, which happily, did not end up with some kind of big bombardment or with a lot of casualties like, it happened in Croatia and Bosnia. And, sort of in the last more than 30 years since we have the independence, Slovenia has been developing in a very similar way as other post-socialist countries. But similar to other countries, and not only the Eastern Europe countries, is in need of a kind of a long-term thinking, thinking ahead, a decade, 2 decades ago, what kind of a society we want to leave, to our offspring. And, I think that that's kind of a general problem in Europe and elsewhere.
Slovenian identity has always been shaped by its position between larger powers from the Habsburg Empire to Yugoslavia to the EU. How does an old but relatively new hatched small nation define itself on the world stage after regaining independence? How should it balance its rich history and the modern pressure of globalization?
In Slovenia, we have a strong civil society, and happily, a lot of young and not so young people get involved, and in the civil society has been important to, sort of like change the trajectory of the society.
In 2004, Slovenia made the historic decision to join the European Union. Joining the EU, the Eurozone and NATO were monumental steps. These choices link the country to a larger political and economic framework, opening new opportunities but also presenting new challenges.
Overwhelmingly, Slovenians supported the idea of joining EU. I think that was a success story for a small country. Like Slovenia, joining EU brought a lot of benefits.
Today, Slovenia stands at a crossroads once again as the country celebrates 20 years in the European Union. It faces new choices about its future, as does the EU. What choices await all of us in the decades ahead?
Democracy is under threat. We have a lot of authoritarian-leaning politicians all around the world, wars in many corners of the world. So European Union, unfortunately, also does not have a common foreign policy, does not have a kind of a clear way to deal with authoritarian leaders. I think those kind of questions of how to strengthen the democratic institutions, how to also, keep human rights alive, how to keep some respect for international law, that are the choices which I see in the political domain as very important.
Slovenia's story is a reminder that every nation is shaped by its choices, by the collective will to carve out a future, and by the thinkers and doers who help make sense of the path forward. As Renata reminds us, being Slovenian means more than just holding on to the past. It means being brave enough to face whatever choices the future may bring.
When you make a choice, you cannot predict what would be the outcome.
Gay man, also Lithuanian. I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a brother. Sexual orientation is something that belongs to the sphere of privacy, so it's a very private thing. I have built my political career on my sexual orientation.
Aš, Tomas Vytautas Raskevičius, prisiekiu būti ištikimas Lietuvos Respublikai.
When Thomas first stood for Parliament, part of his application was a bold statement: I am a professional gay man. What does that mean to be open about myself and active for the community? It requires a silent spectator to become an active participant.
We were one of the ECU member countries which had the first Pride quite relatively late. So it was 2010, 6 years after the accession to the EU. I did not participate in the parade itself, and I remember it very well. I was observing it from the other side of the river, and I was listening to the conversations of other people. And there were two elderly women, like very tired ones, like 60s, 70s, and the conversations among those two women goes like that. Now we are going to see, one of them is saying, and the other one is responding, what we are going to see. And the first one who posed the question says, we are going to see how the gay people look like.
While the first Pride in Vilnius had only a small group of brave activists and many policemen, 14 years later the situation has changed. Around 20,000 people take part in Pride. The situation is similar in neighbouring Estonia and Latvia. Legislation is different in Lithuania. The previous legislation improving LGBT rights was passed 20 years ago. In 2024, same-sex unions were recognised in one form or another in 24 of the 27 EU member states. The Lithuanian Seimas has rejected a bill to recognise same-sex partnerships.
We used to have a lot this narrative that gay rights are being imported from Brussels. especially in the period between 2004 and 2014. But I think once the Crimea in Ukraine happened, that narrative just stopped and disappeared, because then there was the silent realization that, it's not that the gay rights are being imported from Brussels, but rather the protection of civil and political rights that defines the Western Hemisphere or Western cultural space that distinguishes us from the things that are happening in the East. And now it's not only about the LGBT rights, it's also the rights of ethnic minorities, it's also the rights of women to be free from being beaten up or killed in terms of domestic violence. So there are many culturally sensitive issues that has to be tackled.
Every human is unique and capable of loving and being loved.
Changes take time, but time also requires transformation. Thomas is sceptical about whether Lithuania's accession to the EU has improved LGBT human rights, and yet change is happening. Part of it is that societies are discussing these issues.
When I was 14, so it was like 2003, exactly 1 year before the accession to the EU, and I started having these feelings and ideas about my sexual orientation. I remember the complete feeling of isolation. So back when I was 14, if I had the chance to see somebody like me now in the parliament, that would have been much easier, right? So my main, of course, agenda is to pass the legislation, to advocate for civil union legislation. But I think if my public presence plays that specific role to at least one single young person out there, discovering themselves and trying to find some support in the public space, I think then my work is very worth it.
It was just like I was in the countryside and I had met just my relatives who had holidays and they had proper jobs. And I was like, oh shit, what if, just thinking, what if this thing that I'm working on doesn't land anywhere, doesn't fly at all? And how horrible, 7 years of my life accepting that maybe it doesn't fly anywhere and that's okay. But maybe then I just find something else to do. I was ready to quit filmmaking.
The documentary Smoke Sauna Sisterhood wasn't a failure. On the contrary, a film in which nothing happens, in which women in a sauna talk about women's life experiences, has become the most successful Estonian film. It has been screened all over the free world. Sundance Film Festival Award for Best Director, European Film Academy Award for Best Documentary, nominations and awards from dozens of festivals. Festivals are not just red carpets and champagne. It's a belief in a creative idea that is threatened by self-doubt. It is also the result of the work of producers. In the case of Smoke Sauna Sisterhood, good creative work has coincided with strong production work.
Yes, Estonia is small. We have what's called the market failure or the market block, meaning that we don't actually have a market here. But then again, I collaborate with Iceland and they are 1 million less people, and in a way their film culture is even more flourishing. Even though it's a small market, we deserve to have our own film culture, and film culture is part of the national culture and heritage. So I'm very aware of that. And I'm also happy to see that now we have actually a very lively film landscape.
Mariana's first job on the set was a clapper. Now she has her own production company, co-produces successful films, teaches production at the Baltic Media School, and is aware of the importance of her work in the Estonian film industry. This has allowed her to cure her Eastern European inferiority complex, seeing too little value in her stories and work. This is a destructive way of thinking because it undermines possibilities and courage.
So my education and training in producing has been very much affected by the possibilities that the European Union and Creative Europe made possible.
If Estonia was not part of the EU film industry and co-production opportunities, Smoke Sauna Sisterhood would be a different film with a smaller audience and a quieter success.
I would say 90% of my producing knowledge and skills comes from international collaborations and workshops, and having this success, observing what my peers are doing with their films, being part of an European film community. With Smoke Sauna Sisterhood, I had to do so many things in promotion and so on that haven't really been done in Estonia, definitely not in Estonian documentary, in some sense also in Estonian cinema before, at least stuff I hadn't done before. And I've been asking myself, how did I know what to do? And then my answer is that because I observed and had access during these workshops I attended behind the scenes into the minds of my peers and other producers. So when the moment came, I could apply it, I could activate it and apply it, was in my system.
Our children communicate in English, listen to the same songs, watch the same films on Netflix, read similar books, wear similar clothes, and dream similar dreams. Are we becoming the same? The loss of identity was part of the Euroscepticism before joining the EU. This intimate story, told in Estonian, in a traditional Estonian sauna, while attracting international attention, proves that the local is globally interesting.
I see myself very rooted on one hand, especially as South Estonian culture, but very global at the same time, and there's no conflict. I can be very contemporary and very local and very universal at the same time, and I think the experience of Smoke Sauna Sisterhood has also maybe taught that to many people in Estonia, that when you do something very local, I mean, it's, when you just think about it, we shot in small, dark smoke sauna in one small point on this earth. Very local language and everything. But it's traveling throughout the world. So not be afraid of doing something local, yet often actually through the local, you touch something universal. And the local is not something like, it has to be like from museum, local, like something like, let's say when we talk about folklore, it's here and now. It's here and now. And so again, let's sing those old songs, but let's come up with new lyrics.
Sisterhood around the world, sisterhood around the world, humanhood around the globe, humanhood around the globe.
Czech literature has always been able to capture the essence of life during political upheavals in Central Europe. Writers such as Kafka, Kundera, Hašek, and Hrabal have told stories about revolution, struggles for freedom, wars, and existential events that have echoed far beyond the borders of the Czech Republic. But no other figure better embodies the intersection of literature and politics than Václav Havel.
After he died, the cult of Havel has become even more almost irrational. He has become a big legend again.
In the 1960s, because of repercussions by the communist regime, Havel could only find work as a stagehand here at the Nazar Bradley Theatre in Prague. This is where we meet one of Havel's biographers, the journalist Daniel Kaiser, who published his work on the writer and statesman in two parts, Dissident Václav Havel and President Václav Havel, in 2009 and 2014. From the wings of this stage, Václav Havel observed, created, and wrote his first plays, using the language of theatre to question authority, challenge oppression, and provoke thought. Here, he honed his craft, both as a dramatic and political writer, but was also later in prison for his views and for what he wrote.
His literary work is mainly overshadowed by him being politician and being the symbol of the Velvet Revolution. Which is a pity a bit, but probably quite natural.
Havel started as a playwright, then turned essayist and dissident, but from there he took the huge leap and became leader of the nation. He used his pen as a weapon of change, and his words during the Velvet Revolution and the fall of the Iron Curtain resonated with the entire nation and with the whole world.
Přátelé, pravda a svoboda musí zvítězit.
So when the revolution started, the people from the opposition movement who were like the driving force of the revolution, they among themselves, of course, knew that Havel would be the best one to be the leader. But they had to persuade the public as well, so, which they did, and it was a big PR campaign, which was brilliant. And they succeeded in persuading 80-90% of the population that Havel is the man, that he is to be president.
Slibuji na svou čest a svědomí věrnost Československé socialistické republice.
Havel's advocacy for the Czech Republic's EU membership came from his deep belief in the values of democracy, human rights, and peace. Values that have been denied to his country during the years of authoritarian rule. His leadership was instrumental in the Czech Republic's succession to the EU.
When the EU became EU and he became politician, he was in favor all the time. He supported the EU very much.
Daniel Kaiser admires Havel for much, but does not agree with everything he did.
When we became members of the EU 20 years from now, I would expect him to be sometimes critical, which he wasn't. Which is actually a little bit surprising, because when you read what he wrote back in the communist times, one of the things he didn't like back then was that the modern society has become like a bureaucratic institution, technocracy basically, or system, he called it system. And that is something he could certainly apply to the modern EU.
Havel was not just a Czech leader. He was an intellectual who saw beyond national borders and toward a future of cooperation and unity. His legacy is visible not only in the streets of Prague, but in the very fabric of European democracy.
I was quite surprised recently that Havel made a case for countries like Ukraine joining the NATO already 2004.
From the stage of the Nazar Bradley Theatre to the political stage of Europe, Václav Havel's journey stands as a testament to the power of words and ideas. He showed us that art can change the course of history. In the story of Europe, Havel's voice still echoes today.
Even today, for someone like being a student of history, contemporary history, I would advise you to pick up this and this essay and read it, because otherwise you will miss something.
Each summer, the Maltese islands light up in celebration as villages transform for the festa. Rooted in centuries-old traditions, these communal feasts are an explosion of colour, music, food and faith. A moment where Malta's rich heritage takes centre stage. For generations, these festas have been the heartbeat of the community, a space where young and old come together in shared pride.
I firmly believe that festa is a microcosm of the general state of the nation, so to speak. A lot of issues are reflected in the festa. This includes political issues like immigration, like climate change.
Alexander, a composer and self-proclaimed festa freak, is a keeper of this heritage, passionately gathering and upholding the rituals. For him, the festa represents a mixture of ancient and modern stories, a series of communal actions that bind us together and help us understand each other. Through storytelling, art and research, he wishes to preserve the rich ritual tapestry of Malta's festa culture, where each town and each neighbourhood have their traditions and expressions.
Ever since I was a young boy, I was taken to a lot of festas thanks to my grandparents and my uncle. However, it was mostly as a spectator, and throughout my youth I remained mostly a spectator within the festa environment.
But today, many young Maltese are searching for new ways to express their identity. Instead of banners and fireworks, they turn to activism, art and global causes, redefining what it means to be Maltese in a modern Europe.
Generally speaking, if there is an entertainment element to it, and it's very common nowadays to have like discos and dances, attached to these rituals, you will find youth participating. But when it comes to the more serious side of the rituals, the liturgical side, there is a noticeable decline. I think, unfortunately, because of social media and algorithms and information bubbles, there is a sense of detachment from the history of that ritual. So while they might be participating in that ritual, there is often a gap between them and the older generations.
Hand in hand with the festa culture goes the concept of pika, which roughly translates as festa rivalry, or the desire to do better than one's neighbour, and the sense of pride gained after beating one's rival. Towns and villages have traditionally been competitive on various levels due to pika trying to outdo each other. For the most part, pika is good-humoured, but there can be a darker side to it.
Because Malta is an island, a very, very small country, because its resources are limited, people are much more likely to get very, very defensive on what they have and what they own. And that sense of ownership can be beautiful on one side because people will take care of their own heritage, but it has its ugly side where people can get defensive to the point of being offensive, violent, they can exclude other people. However, a lot of people have this mistaken idea that festa rivalry kind of dominates everyday life 365 days a year. It is not the case. It is expressed at very specific moments in the festa ritual.
In this small yet dynamic island nation, being Maltese is a story of finding balance between heritage and progress, a tale written anew with every generation. Ask Latvians who has the most beautiful money in the world, no modesty or politeness. The Latvian lats was and is the most beautiful money in the world, even though, since 2014, Latvia has also joined the Eurozone.
Katra tauta mīl savu naudu, un ne visām ir tik ļoti daudz skaistas naudas izkalts, kā tas ir Latvijā. Tā ir ar savu vēstījumu un visu to, kas mums ir tāds dārgs, tieši šīs latviskās vērtības. Ozols, Daugavas loki, Latviju sēta, kuģis un ornaments.
The earliest coins minted in Latvia, dating from the beginning of the 13th century, are decorated with portraits of rulers. Since the establishment of the Latvian state and the introduction of the national currency, the lats, money is no longer just a means of payment and a portrait of power. Coins and banknotes embody the values of the nation and become an aesthetic asset in their own right. This coin, issued in 1929, is a symbol that reminds Latvians of freedom throughout the decades of Soviet occupation. Latvians took the silver coin with them during their refugee journeys during the Second World War and their deportation to Siberia, and kept it through the years of famine so that they could return home with it as soon as possible. It was inherited, given as a gift, transformed into jewelry.
Man mājās visu bērnību ir stāvējuši sudraba pieclatnieki. Tur vienmēr ir bijuši, es kopš sev atceros, bija pa brīdim tur kastīti apskaties, pagros tos pieclatniekus un atkal tur noliec apakaļ. Kad es redzu lacis, redzu gan savu bērnību, es redzu to kastīti, kur es skatījos sudraba pieclatniekus. Es atceros visu savu dzimtas vēsturi.
Latvia was preparing to join the Eurozone in 2013. To do so, the Maastricht criteria had to be met. In return, this promised political and economic benefits, but the Latvian public was reluctant. Only 1 in 4 was in favour of joining the euro. When Ivars Drula took part in his first coin design competition, it was not clear what the inscription on the coin should be, the lats or the euro, and yet it was the euro. In 2014, Latvia became the 18th country to join the Eurozone.
Eiro nauda, viņa ir tāda universāla. Tur nav tik ļoti tādas identitātes zīmes. Kad es uz viņu skatos, es redzu naudu, es redzu nominālu vērtības, man nav tāda emocionāla pieķeršanās. Pie Latvijas man bija tāda emocionāla pieķeršanās.
Latvians save money. They display it in an art museum. They look at it as a museum piece. They give coins as a thing of beauty. And in Latvia, even little children make money.
Tā ir cūciņa. Es pat neatceros, vai tā bija meža cūka vai nebija. Kur ir staigā un kurā ir divi šitie riņķi gredzeni uz astes un lacs ar C-burtu viens. Audzinātāji tad arī nosūtīja to monētiņu bankā.
Emilia Adumane is currently the youngest coin designer in Latvia. She was 6 years old when her drawing became a coin design. She is now studying at the Academy of Arts. Determining what she would depict on a coin today is far more challenging than during her childhood, because today, Emilia, like other young people, rarely handles coins anymore.
Es galvenokārt tagad tikai iPhone to aplikāciju, kur uzreiz var noskanēt, un maku lielāko laika daļu vispār neņem līdzi.
Lai arī tā pārējie uz eiro monētu, viņi bija tādi sentimentāli sāpīgi, mēs zaudējām savu valūtu, nauda vairs nav tik skaista. Bet kā ceļojošam cilvēkam tā bija tik liela atvieglojuma sajūta, ka tev vairāk nav jāmaina nauda, tu izkāp ārā Itālijā, lidostā vai Francijā. Un tas, kas tev ir kabatās no Latvijas, un par to arī tu pērci saldējumu.
If you still have coins in your wallet, have a look to see if there's a €2 coin of Latvian design. You will see on it the profile of the Latvian folk maiden who lives in the historical memory of every Latvian. It is the same face that adorned the silver 5 Lat coin that have been saved for decades. The Latvian folk maiden now lives in the European Union.
Are you an emotional person?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. I'm Polish, so we don't speak about emotions, not so much. I mean, I think that's for the countries that had communism for a long time. In Poland, it finished at 86. I was born at 87, but you still could feel it when I was a young kid, and our parents was raised to not talk about emotions so much, so they didn't teach us that, and I think we just discovered that, like my aged people discovered after being 30 that there is something more inside of you than just being happy or sad, I like to change topics a lot. I like to change subjects a lot. I like to change the things that I'm painting to not get bored. I don't like to paint the same stuff all the time. So I try to switch as much as I can, but it's the base, it's always the feelings behind the work and maybe the feeling that I had in my childhood or like moments of my life. I leave the happy images for the commercials and Coca-Cola and all that stuff. I don't want to depict happy people. You have so much, like a whole spectrum of feelings and emotions that you can choose from, that making a happy person is just lazy. Everybody asks you what's the story behind the work, but I always leave the final work to interpretation. The viewer can decide what does he sees on the image. Some of the interpretations are better than the one that I had in the beginning. First I started with spray cans and graffiti, and then I learned more and more about art and what I can do, and I did so many walls that I was going up and up and then bigger, and it kind of happened by itself, let's say. I never thought that, it's not that when I was 13 I was like, okay, I'm gonna paint walls now in my life, It wasn't an idea, it was just a hobby that I did after school, and it changed into like my whole life now. Joining the European Union changed a lot for us. I was 17 in that time, 20 years ago, and I just started doing bigger and bigger walls. And in that time, a lot of cities from Poland wanted to be the European culture city, something like that. A lot of cities went into like the art direction, festivals connected to painting or with music. And a lot of festivals actually gave me a chance to paint a wall. And the whole country changed, like really changed, Like it got more European in a way that it was more safe, it's more developed, There is more budget for festivals because before that there was no like mural festivals. There was just few small festivals with people like really interested in it, but it wasn't like so mainstream. Even the opening of the borders, let's say, so you don't have to have a passport to go to Europe. You can travel freely. That was a big change for me personally. Sometimes I didn't know where I'm traveling, like what city and I'm gonna go to. But it's most of Europe, some US and Canada.
If you think about the current situation in Europe, do you think there is some dominant emotion?
I would say it's fear right now. The whole Europe goes really polarized right now. And it's mostly fear, I would say. Graffiti comes more from doing something in a spot that nobody else did before you, and it's super hard to get, and you know, it's easy to get caught, and you're just showing other people like, look, I did it, this is mine. I still have a little bit of the approach of me taking the spot, you know, for me. That's my wall now, you know? And there will be no commercial on it. It didn't change so much. It changed in the way that I do subjects, and I can do it in the daytime, and I can, you know, take 7 days to finish a wall, and I don't have to run from the police. But the base of the idea kind of, for me personally, stayed a little bit the same. It still catches your eye. It still steals your like 5 seconds when you see graffiti or you see a mural and you like ask like why the guy did that, or like what's on the image. That's kind of stealing your 5 seconds of your life, no, and getting in your head a little bit. And that's a cool thing.
Welcome festival goers to the Island of Freedom, or Sziget Festival. One of Europe's largest and most iconic cultural gatherings sit on the picturesque island of Buda, in the heart of Budapest. This festival is a kaleidoscope of music, art and community spirit.
1993-ban indult a sziget, nem sokkal a rendszerváltás után, és akkor az alapidea az még nem az volt, hogy majd egy nagy nemzetközi fesztivál lesz belőle.
Since its inception in 1993, Sziget has grown from a modest gathering into a global phenomenon, attracting around 700,000 visitors from more than 100 countries to the week-long festival each year.
Most people would be surprised how much of the international travels are responsible for the CO2 emission of the festival. In a case of such a Sziget, it's over 90%.
As Sziget evolves, it also embraces its responsibility towards the environment. With the commitment to sustainability, the festival implements eco-friendly practices, encourages waste reduction, and promotes conscious travelling, demonstrating that celebration and care for our planet can coexist.
We hope that sooner or later we can achieve 100% recollection of PET bottles and aluminium cans. And now we are in plastic bottles, we are about like 75%, if I remember well, while with the cans about 35%. Those are not that much relevant from the CO2 aspect, but very relevant from the look and feel aspect.
Akos has been sustainability manager at the festival for the past 21 years. During this time, they've introduced several projects that he can be proud of, but he admits they've all taken a long time to implement.
It took us 10 years to introduce the reusable cups. So now it's 6-7 million disposable cups that we saved. And that's personally, for me, it's already an achievement, because it took a lot of advocacy just within the organization. And it's great to see that how like one department is a little bit ahead, how another one is catching up. But it's happening. But it's years of work.
Founded soon after Hungary's transition to democracy, Sziget was envisioned as a space for cultural expression, social exchange and artistic exploration. The festival has not only shaped the landscape of music in Hungary, but has also become a symbol of openness and unity in the country, more so since the accession to the EU.
És akkor, amikor az uniós csatlakozása volt Magyarországnak, akkor ugye a politikusok is, meg a különböző szakemberek is pont példaként a szigetet állították sokszor, hogy ezáltal a Magyarország is egy picit egy olyan nemzetközi közösség tagja lesz, mint amit a szigeten már itt megtapasztalhattak az ide kilátogató magyar fiatalok.
Music is the heartbeat of the festival. But Sziget is more than just a music festival, it is a community. Here the spirit of freedom and acceptance thrives. Visitors come together to share experiences, foster friendships and celebrate the beauty of diversity.
Valahogy azt éreztük, hogy ez a fajta légkör, ami itt a szigeten uralkodik, és ami a mai napig azt gondolom, hogy a sikerének a titka, hogy ennyi ember, ennyiféle helyről, ennyiféle gondolkodással idejön, és együtt jól érzi magát, és attól még jobban érzik magukat, hogy sokfélék vagyunk, és nem zavarja őket az, hogy a másik más szeret, vagy máshogy öltözik, vagy más a bőrszíne, vagy más a gondolkodása, hanem ezt élvezik, és ezt egy élményként élik meg, hogy milyen jó ez a fajta színes világ. Ez azt gondolom, hogy ez valahol az Európai Uniónak is egy alapgondolata.
The festival hosts a range of art installations, interactive workshops and discussions that inspire creativity and connection. It is a place where individuals can express themselves freely and find their tribe.
Például minél inkább azoknak a civil szervezeteknek, azoknak a kezdeményezéseknek teret biztosítsunk, akik megmutatni szeretnék magukat. Mindegy, hogy az most valamilyen kisebbség, vagy valamilyen speciális kultúra, vagy valamilyen speciális gondolat.
Take the journey through the vibrant world of Sziget Festival and explore how this island of freedom continues to inspire generations. In a world that can feel divided, Sziget reminds us of the power of music, art and community to bring people together, celebrating the joy of being alive.
Mert az igazi érték és erőt ad szerintem mindenkinek az, hogy látjuk, hogy itt valóban sokszínűen, sokféle módon lehet úgy együtt lenni, hogy ettől mindenki jobban érzi magát.
I like the Buddhists have this thing, they call it 5 remembrances. Every day they say to themselves, okay, everybody's going to be ill and I'm not an exception. Everybody's going to die and I'm not an exception, so on and so forth. And it brings you sort of like closer to yourself and closer to reality of what life is. It makes me more hungry for life. Yeah.
To live is to grow older. But what does it truly mean to grow older? Zrema, a non-governmental organisation based in Bratislava, Slovakia, offers stereotype-free answers for this question. For some, it means facing mobility changes, while for others, it's the opportunity to finally pursue long-delayed dreams. Some may experience loneliness, while others form new friendships.
So once you get a chance to observe them, you know that like you want this person to be your friend because they are free. They don't care. They enjoy their time. They present their ideas. They dance if they want. They play musical instrument if they want. They criticize what they want, even if somebody else, me, would not criticize it. But they criticize it because they don't have, much to lose. Like they are free, I would say.
Zrema started as a one-yard activism of a few people. They thought it was wrong that in a yard where neighbours gather, there was a wall behind which the residents of the day centre of seniors were hidden. The activists got the fence demolished, and little by little, the residential courtyard became a space for different generations to come together. When the city announced the closure of the day centre, the people of the courtyard launched a protest. The city did not listen to them. The day centre was locked. However, the activists set up a non-governmental organisation, NGO, to maintain dialogue between the different generations.
Relationships is the most important thing. That anything else is a nice sort of add-on, but if we don't have each other, then we don't have anything. And it sounds so corny when I say it. I mean, it's boring me when I say it, but it's true. It's the truth. And so that's what Zrema definitely taught me.
Zrema brings together the professionals from different fields who, in their spare time, blur the boundaries between people of different generations. They organise book lovers and storyteller evenings, trips, and even a festival. They help the municipality to create useful, inclusive social services for seniors, and they believe that having a conversation can change people's lives.
Each of us is aging. It's happening. You can't stop it. You don't want to stop it because you want to live. Living is aging. So, these two processes, they are identical. It's not something what is happening to somebody else, it's happening to you right now. So it's you can think about older people, but you are also older people. You are old person, we call it old person in training. It's happening to you.
Europe is greying. In 2024, for the first time, the number of Europeans aged 65 and over will surpass those aged 15 and under. Zrema activists believe that since Slovakia's accession to the EU, provisions and opportunity for the elderly have been gradually improving. However, social policy is also shaped by public policy, which remains fluid with shifting priorities and challenges. Regardless of who is in power, we are aging every minute. So we must ask ourselves, how will we live in old age? If you desire eternal beauty, all you need to do is swim 3 times around Aphrodite's rock next time you're in Cyprus. This beach near the ancient town of Kuklia, according to Greek legend, is where the goddess Aphrodite first stepped on land after she was born of the foamy sea. But Kuklia has been a sacred site of worship for 13,000 years, long before Greek mythology.
The site where we are now, it's the sanctuary of Aphrodite, the ruins of the sanctuary of Aphrodite. During antiquity, it was the most important worship place for the great goddess of the island, which was later assimilated to the Greek goddess of Aphrodite.
Historical presence on Cyprus can be measured back to the late Paleolithic times, and it counts itself as one of the oldest inhabited countries in Europe. Throughout history, the great regional civilizations, Assyrians, Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, Venetians, Ottomans, and even the British have lived on and left their mark all over this ancient island.
Cyprus is really interesting, especially for me. I like Cyprus because it's part of the Greek civilization, but it's not like Greece, it's not fully Greek. It's part of the East also, of the Levant, of the Eastern cultures. So there is a mixture of Eastern and Greek culture. And always I found this particularity of Cyprus very, very interesting.
The locals joke that you can't even plant an oleander shrub in your garden without unearthing some old archaeological treasure. This is why, for many decades now, Cyprus has been a favourite for archaeological expeditions from all over Europe and the world.
Cyprus had always contacts with Europe and with the whole world through archaeology. So it was, the contact was already there. There are several missions working on the island from France, from the UK, from Sweden, from Switzerland. We have a very close connection through our profession with Europe and the whole world.
Thousands of these archaeological finds are exhibited and stored in the cramped Cyprus Museum in the historical heart of the capital, Nicosia. It was founded in 1882 and the current building was built in 1908. But the museum collection has far outgrown its capacity of this building and only a small part of the collection can be displayed at once.
Αυτόν το μουσείο εδώ που βλέπετε έχει ήδη επιτελέσει το σκοπό του. Έχουν περάσει ήδη περισσότερο από 100 χρόνια που ιδρύθηκε και υπήρξε μεγάλη ανάγκη τόσο από τη συσσόρευση μεγάλου αριθμού αρχαιοτήτων που βρίσκονται εδώ αποθηκευμένα, όπως επίσης και από τη θεματολογία και τους περιορισμούς που μας προκύπτουν από το μουσείο εδώ. Έχουμε πολλούς περιορισμούς χώρου, δεν μπορούμε να αναπτύξουμε το αφήγημα που θέλουμε.
The old museum, I think that it accomplished its mission, and now really Cyprus needs something new to promote its culture.
Finally, this is about to change as a new modern museum is being built. It will exhibit all the elements that have given birth to the Cypriot civilization as well as characteristics of the Mediterranean life and culture that are still alive in society today.
Η εφορία μουσείων άρχισε να δουλεύει εντατικά για τη δημιουργία ενός καινούριου αφηγήματος για το νέο Κυπριακό Μουσείο. Μέχρι τώρα η Κύπρος προβαλόταν ως ένας δέχτης διαφόρων πολιτισμών και επιδράσεων από την γύρω περιοχή. Εμείς αυτό που θέλουμε να δείξουμε είναι ότι τη δυναμική παρουσία της Κύπρου στις διάφορες περιόδους και ότι δεν ήταν μόνο ένας δέχτης, αλλά ήταν ένας πολιτισμός με όλα τα δικά του χαρακτηριστικά.
It's one of the biggest projects at this moment and a very important investment in culture to promote the history of the island and the importance of the island in the whole Europe, in the whole Mediterranean region.
Ελπίζουμε ότι το καινούριο μουσείο θα είναι έτοιμο γύρω στο 2028 και θα μπορέσει να δεχτεί τους πρώτους επισκέπτες.
So it needs Cyprus something like that to promote its culture. So it's amazing that we're going to see it in the next years.
So next time you're in Cyprus, after you have swum around Aphrodite's rock, maybe visit the new museum in Nicosia and bathe in the rich history and culture of this surprising island that has infinitely more to offer than sunshine and golden sands.
Parasti, kad nāku uz centru, tad ir tik daudz mantu un koferi un vēl viss kaut kas, tad apsargi bieži jautā, lai paņemu numuriņu, jo domā, ka esmu arī bēgla no Ukrainas.
Victoria is not a refugee. She speaks fluent Latvian, even though she is Ukrainian. She came to Latvia before the war, learned Latvian, acquired citizenship, and was trained as a musician. In Ukraine, they are still part of her family and therefore part of her life. From the very first days of the war, she has been answering the question through her thoughts and actions. What can we do to help Ukraine? The musician's first answer was a charity concert to call upon society.
Tas bija mans pienākums, un tajā pirmajā koncertā tomēr es nevarēju nodziedāt, jo līdz vasarai, kad es uzstājos uz Okina brīvības festivālā Ukrainā, es nevarēju padziedāt. Es nevarēju nodziedāt nevienu skaņu. Un pilnīgi pārstāju domāt par dziesmām, par kultūru. Man liekas, ka tas tagad ir tik ļoti lieks.
What is the meaning of songs if your homeland is at war, if your people are dying, your homes and lives are falling apart? Who can sing in the presence of death? He who wants to live. Culture, values, choices are also the target of war. That is why, when the war started, Victoria founded the Center for Ukrainian Studies to promote and maintain a strong Ukrainian culture in Latvia in cooperation between Latvian and Ukrainian institutions. In Ukraine, cultural values are preserved and protected not only by museums but also by everyone, including by learning and speaking Ukrainian.
Kad tagad cilvēki fronte ņem līdzi višvanku, kad bēgļi pametot savas mājas, viņi ņem līdzi pasu, dokumentus un višvanku, tas kļuvis par tādu nācijas simbolu. Es to pat lietoju bieži tādu metaforu, ka tā ir Ukraiņu nācijas bruņuvēsta un visi tie simboli, visas tās zīmes, tas ir nācijas kods. Tā ir mūsu nācijas pašidentitātes saiknes sajūtas, jo, kad man ļoti bieži jautā, kur Ukraiņi smēļās to spēku, tajā arī viņi smēļās spēku, savas tradīcijās, savā vēsturē, savā kultūrā.
When we meet Victoria, the war in her homeland has been going on for 820 days. 2 years of war is unbearably long, with fear and strength, with the collapse of previous meaning and the creation of a new one, with loss and faith in victory. A large part of the Ukrainian forces sees hope and security in the possibility of joining the European Union.
Regulāri veicot aptājas, mūsu sabiedrība lielākā daļa ļoti sagaida to brīdi, to stundu, kad mēs pievienosimies Eiropas Savienībai. Tā ir arī sabiedrības lielākas daļas vēlme. Viņi grib dzīvot Eiropā, nevis atgriezties tajā šausmas, kas bija Padomju Savienībā.
2 years of Victoria's life was spent helping refugees arrive in Latvia, preparing relief packages to Ukraine, translating technical literature for soldiers, and translating President Zelensky's speeches. She has regained the ability to sing that she lost at the beginning of the war, and her belief in the value of song has only grown stronger.
Kad es redzēju, kā cilvēki bumbu patversmēs dzied dziesmas, kā mūsu puiši frontē visi dzied un klausās mūziku, viņi klausās tos ierakstus. Tas dod spēku cilvēkiem vienoties, tas dod cilvēkiem ticību, tas dod cilvēkiem kopā būšanas sajūtu. Un arī tajā 25. februārī, kad mūsu kori dziedāja gan Ukrainas dziesmas, es atceros, ka izskanēja tā slavēna Ukrainas dziesmas par plašu upi Dņipro. Es atceros, ka man pilnīgi bija zosāda un es sapratu, kāpēc tas bija nepieciešams.
А ми тую червону калину підіймемо, а ми нашу славну Україну, гей, гей, розвеселимо.
A Evropská unie je pro mě hlavně o zbližování národů a o fungování celé Evropy.
Tradīcijas, dažādu skaistu valstu kopums un savstarpējas attiecības.
Ühtsust, koostööd, vabadust ning usaldust.
Laisvė, galimybės keliauti, pažinti kitas kultūras ir pasakoti pasauliu apie savąją.
Slobodu a viac možností, či už akademických alebo pracovných.
To przede wszystkim wolność, poczucie wspólnoty oraz ogrom możliwości. Mogę studiować w wielu pięknych miastach, zwiedzać kolejne kraje oraz poznawać inspirujących ludzi.
Számomra az Európai Unió a szabadságot és a sokszínűséget jelenti, illetve az egyenlőséget és a lehetőséget, bármerre is megyek az unión belül.
Для мене концепція ЄС асоціюється з єдністю, співпрацею між країнами, культурним різноманіттям та прагненням до розвитку.